I never told them the old attic camera still worked. It had been there since before Brian was born, tucked into the carved wooden base of the chandelier. George installed it himself in '88, back when he still believed technology would save the world. We never used it much, maybe once when someone tried to break into the garage. But I remembered it, and more importantly, I remembered how to access the feed. I only checked it that night because I couldn't sleep. The bed in Brian and Haley's guest room was too soft, the air too clean, too filtered. I missed the scent of lemon polish, the gentle groan of my own mattress, the tap-tap of branches on the bedroom window. Here, I felt like a visitor in a polished museum. It was nearly midnight. I was sitting in the dark, back against the wall, laptop warming my knees. I clicked the browser link I'd bookmarked months ago. I wasn't expecting anything. Just a bit of comfort, maybe. A glimpse of home. But when the feed loaded and I saw two shadows moving across my old bedroom floor, I couldn't breathe. At first I thought it was a memory, a dream. But the lamp was on. The quilted armchair was gone. Haley sat on the edge of the bed with her arms crossed, her hair pulled into that taut ponytail that gave her headaches, though she'd never admit it. Brian stood beside the dresser, facing her. His voice was hushed but tense. "Everything's in motion. The appraisal's next week." "Appraisal?" Haley scoffed. "She's still legally the owner, Brian. We need her signature, or the other document." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm working on it. She's forgetful. It won't be hard to argue diminished capacity. The lawyer's ready to file." I stared at the screen, ice spreading in my chest. They were talking about my house, the house George and I built with weekend shifts and after-dinner planning. The house where Brian took his first steps, where I cooked Christmas dinners even after my knees started giving out. The house where I still kept George's old toolbox in the hall closet, untouched. And they were selling it. Without me. Haley's voice was sharper now. "If she goes back, we lose everything. She needs to stay here, long enough for the papers to go through." "She trusts me," Brian muttered. "She'll sign?" The camera didn't have audio, but I could read their faces. I could see everything I needed in the way Haley's lips curled when she smiled. Triumph. That cold, deliberate kind of triumph that left a sour taste in the mouth. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long time. The room around me was silent, save for the faint hum of the air purifier Haley insisted on putting in for my lungs. I stared at the blank wall across from me, remembering the faded wallpaper in my real bedroom, the one I hadn't been allowed to return to since my fall in April. The official reason was safety. "You need support, Mom," Brian had said. "It's temporary." But now I knew better. They didn't want me back. They wanted what I had, and they'd already decided I didn't deserve it anymore. I should have cried. I should have felt angry. But what I felt instead was something else entirely. Old, familiar steel rising in my gut. The same steel that got me through George's death, through 28 years of teaching kids who didn't care about Shakespeare, through chemo in 2012, when I refused to wear the pink scarf. I closed the laptop gently, as if not to wake something. They thought I was weak. They thought I was fading. They'd forgotten who I used to be. I stood up slowly, favoring my left leg, walked to the small guest room desk, opened the drawer Haley had filled with scented notepads and unopened pens. Buried beneath the clutter was my leather notebook, the one I kept hidden even now. I flipped to the last used page. My handwriting was shaky, but still mine. June 2nd, 11:57 p.m. Brian and Haley in bedroom, discussing house sale. Mentions of diminished capacity, legal action, no awareness of camera. I underlined no awareness twice. Then I looked up at the mirror across the room. What I saw wasn't a confused old woman. It was someone remembering how to fight. The morning light here was too clean, not like at home, where it filtered through old lace curtains, catching dust in golden beams. Here, everything was white and flat and sterile, the kind of brightness that exposed more than it revealed. I made my way to the kitchen slowly, relying on the cane they'd insisted I use. Not because I needed it, my leg was healing fine, but because Haley said it made people feel better, as if my walking unaided was somehow a threat. Haley was already there, humming tunelessly as she sliced strawberries into a glass bowl. Her hair was immaculate, makeup on by 7. I often wondered who she was performing for in this house, where the only audience was her teenage son and an old woman she clearly resented. "Morning, Jeanette," she said, without turning. "I set out the pill box for you. Don't forget your blood pressure meds this time." "I haven't forgotten them in 20 years, I replied, settling into the chair nearest the window. She said, in that way that wasn't agreement, but also wasn't worth arguing with. I didn't mention that she'd changed my dosage without asking. Or that she'd moved the container from my room to the kitchen last week, for easier monitoring. I just watched her hands, perfectly manicured, never still. Brian joined us a few minutes later. He kissed his wife's cheek and gave me a distracted nod. "Sleep okay, Mom?" I looked at him for a long second. Not especially. He didn't ask why. That was the game we played here. Polite questions with no intention behind them. Concern wrapped in bubble wrap, all form, no substance. "I was thinking," he said, pouring coffee into the travel mug I gave him last Christmas, the one he claimed to love and hadn't touched until now. "We should set up an appointment with Dr. Callahan again, just to check in, make sure everything's all right upstairs." He tapped his temple with a forced chuckle. Upstairs. They wanted a paper trail, something to prove that I wasn't myself, that I was drifting, that selling the house wasn't cruelty, but necessity. "You already booked it, didn't you?" I asked. He blinked. "You never ask unless it's already done," I said softly. Brian looked at Haley, who was studiously rinsing the cutting board. "It's just a formality, for your own records." I stirred my tea with slow, deliberate movements. "You mean for court records?" No one replied. The silence held, taut as a clothesline in winter. Then Haley clapped her hands lightly. "Anyway, don't forget, Jeanette. Eddie has a big test this week. He might need some quiet time in the evenings, so maybe no late-night TV." I nodded once. Eddie, the only one in this house who still looked at me like I was more than furniture. He wasn't home this morning, probably already at school or locked away in his room, preparing. He never said much, but his eyes always held questions he didn't dare ask. Brian left for work. Haley disappeared into her office upstairs, the one she used for remote consulting, which mostly seemed to consist of her pacing and gossiping on Zoom. I finished my tea and waited. I had no plans today, at least none they knew about. But I had tasks, quiet ones. In my room, I opened my suitcase and pulled out a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Not because I wanted to read it. Inside the hollowed-out center was a small flash drive. George had made it for me years ago. A joke at first, until it wasn't. I plugged it into my laptop and began copying the video feed from the night before. Every frame, every shadowed smirk, every word Brian mouthed as he paced my bedroom floor. They hadn't changed anything in the room yet, probably waiting for legal confirmation. But soon they would paint over the walls, remove the old curtains, clear out the closet where George's flannel still hung, untouched since 2017. And they would sell it. Unless I stopped them. At lunch, Haley announced that she'd scheduled a haircut for me on Friday. "You'll feel fresher," she said, with that nurse's smile. I almost laughed. She didn't want me looking like a woman capable of holding a pen, let alone a thought. Fresh meant docile. Fresh meant forgettable. I agreed anyway. Let her think I was playing along. That night, after they'd all gone to bed, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights hum. Eddie's door was cracked open. Soft music playing, a single desk lamp illuminating his books. A good boy. Kind. I remembered the look he gave me when I first moved in, that mix of pity and guilt I knew all too well. They'd told him this was for my own good. But someday soon, he would learn the truth. And I needed to make sure he had something to hold on to when it happened. Something no one could deny. I waited until Haley went to her yoga class. She always left on Tuesdays at 10:30 sharp, in her soft gray leggings and oversized sunglasses, carrying her stainless steel water bottle like it was some sacred relic. Brian was at the office. Eddie was at school. The house, for once, was quiet. I opened the linen closet and reached for the top shelf, fingers brushing past folded towels until I felt the ridged spine of the hardcover copy of War and Peace. I pulled it down slowly, heavier than I remembered, and brought it to my room. Inside, taped to the inside of the dust jacket, was the key. I hadn't touched the safety box in 5 years, not since I updated my will after George passed. But I never got rid of the key. Old habits die hard. By noon, I had my handbag, my cane, and a light jacket. The sun was out, but I felt cold. Always did, these days. I left a note on the kitchen counter in Haley's handwriting. A perfect imitation, practiced during long afternoons when I had nothing but time. Took Jeanette for a walk at Meadowview Park. Back by 2. H. They'd never think to question it. Then I called a cab. "Community Bank on Green Street, please," I told the driver. He didn't ask questions. Older women with quiet voices didn't attract attention, and I liked it that way. The bank smelled the same as it always had: citrus cleaner and carpet glue. The same woman sat behind the counter, though her hair was shorter now, grayer. She blinked when she saw me. "Mrs. Howell?" "Hello, Denise. I'd like to access my safety deposit box." She stood up quickly. "Of course, I just need your ID." I handed it over without shaking. George used to say my hands only trembled when I was truly furious. That wasn't today. Today I was calm. In the private room, the box was heavier than I remembered. Inside, our wedding rings, George's Navy medal, an envelope with birth certificates, and a second flash drive. This one labeled "in case of betrayal." He'd given it to me as a joke years ago, when our neighbor's son tried to sue his parents over inheritance. But George had meant it in his own quiet way. I added the new flash drive to the box, closed the lid, and locked it again. "Anything else you'd like to do today?" Denise asked as she walked me back to the lobby. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Crawford. He handled my estate documents before. It's time for an update." She didn't blink. "Of course, he's available Thursday morning." "Perfect." I left the bank and called the cab again, this time directing it to the grocery store down the road. I didn't need food, but I needed a receipt. Something to hand over in case Haley checked the timestamp on my phone. At the self-checkout, I bought toothpaste, dish soap, and a small bar of chocolate. Then I waited 15 minutes, sitting on the bench outside, before calling for the ride home. When I walked back into the kitchen at exactly 1:58 p.m., Haley was already there, tapping away on her phone. She looked up and smiled. That flat, taut-lipped smile of hers. "Did you get some air?" I held up the grocery bag. "Picked up a few things. Hope that's all right." "Of course. Just next time, maybe let me know first." "Oh, I left a note." I pointed toward the counter. She glanced at it, then frowned. "That's not my handwriting." I didn't miss a beat. "Oh, sorry. I thought it might be easier if I practiced yours. You always say my scrawl is hard to read." Her face tightened for a second, just a flicker, before smoothing back into neutral. I smiled gently and walked past her, the cane tapping against the tile floor like a metronome. That night, after dinner, I found Eddie in the hallway, holding a mug of cocoa. "Need help with dishes, Grandma?" "No, dear, but thank you." He hesitated. "You okay? You seemed different today." I tilted my head. "Different how?" "I don't know, like you're planning something." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "Smart boy." He blinked. "Sometimes," I said softly, "you have to let people think you've gone quiet before you can really be heard." He didn't answer, but he looked at me differently after that, like he saw me again. I dressed with care that Thursday morning. The blouse was navy with small white buttons, the same one I'd worn to George's memorial service. The slacks were pressed, not too formal, not too casual. I even curled the ends of my hair, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I refused to let them say I looked frail or out of it. At 9:20, Haley poked her head into my room. "You're up early," she said too brightly. "Everything all right?" I smiled. "Just wanted to feel presentable today. I have an errand downtown." Her face twitched. "What kind of errand?" "Banking. You know, end-of-month paperwork." She stared at me for a second, lips parting like she might argue. Then she just nodded. "Let me know if you need a ride." "I already booked a cab. Thank you, though." I could see her irritation flicker beneath the politeness. She didn't like things she couldn't control. The cab came at 9:45. I stepped in carefully, folding my hands in my lap as we pulled away from the house. At the law office, Mr. Crawford greeted me like an old friend. He hadn't aged well. Too thin, sunken eyes, but he still had the same leather briefcase, the same cautious voice. "Mrs. Howell," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "Back to update the fortress?" I smiled. That's one way to put it. We sat in his office for nearly an hour. I explained everything in calm, clear terms. That I wished to revoke all prior powers of attorney. That I wanted my assets restructured. That I would be creating a new trust. One that placed temporary control in the hands of a neutral third party until certain conditions were met. "And the house?" he asked. "Protected," I said. "Locked tight. No sale, no lease, no signature. Unless it comes directly from me, verified through your office." He nodded slowly. "You've been thinking about this for a while." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He prepared the paperwork. I read every line. I signed without hesitation. When we were done, he leaned back and regarded me carefully. "Jeanette, if you don't mind my asking, is someone pressuring you?" I gave him the kindest smile I could manage. "Nothing I can't handle, but I appreciate the concern." He hesitated again, then handed me a folder. "This contains everything. Originals are locked here. If anything happens, you call me directly." I took it, tucked it neatly into my bag. On the way out, I paused in the hallway, looking out through the tall glass windows onto the street. Cars passed. People hurried along the sidewalks. No one looked twice at the older woman with the steady cane and the navy blouse. That was fine. Let them keep underestimating me. By the time I returned home, Haley was in the kitchen again, laptop open, her phone on speaker beside it. "But I thought the appraiser was coming Monday," she said to someone, before muting quickly as I walked in. She looked up, smile immediate and tight. "Everything okay?" "Perfectly," I said, setting the grocery bag on the counter. I'd bought a carton of eggs and a lemon just to make the story tidy. "You were gone a while. Long lines? Banks aren't what they used to be." She didn't ask more, but I saw the way her eyes flicked to my bag. The folder was inside, disguised in an envelope labeled prescriptions. That evening, Brian came home earlier than usual. His mood was sour, his shirt untucked. They argued in hushed tones behind the closed office door. I caught only pieces. "She's not signing anything. Not until we get that evaluation?" "Eddie's starting to ask questions." I smiled into my cup of tea and took another slow sip. Eddie passed through the room an hour later, backpack slung low. "Heading to the library," he said. "Good boy," I nodded. "Be safe." He hesitated. "You look different this week." I looked at him carefully. "Do I?" He nodded. "Like you're carrying something." "I am," I said softly. "My name, my house, my life." He frowned, but before he could speak, I stood up and gently patted his shoulder. "Don't worry, dear. I'm not as tired as they think I am." And I wasn't. Not anymore. Eddie found me on the porch Saturday morning, sitting with my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The air was crisp, that rare kind of coolness September gives you before it remembers summer's not quite done. He sat beside me, without a word, legs sprawled, hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands like he used to do when he was 10. I waited. He was never one to rush. "You were right," he said eventually, staring out at the street. I didn't ask what he meant. I just looked at him, and he added quietly, "They're hiding something." I nodded once. "I know." Eddie shifted. "Last night, I came downstairs to get a snack. The office door was open just a crack. I heard Mom talking to someone on speakerphone, a real estate agent. She was giving details about the house. Our house. Yours." I didn't react. I couldn't afford to. Not yet. "She said the paperwork was almost ready," he continued, voice flat. "That they just needed final consent from the owner, but that wouldn't be a problem." "She's mistaken," I said softly. Eddie turned toward me. "What are they doing?" "Trying to sell something that doesn't belong to them. Something they think I won't protect because I'm old or tired or confused." His eyes searched mine, like he was trying to measure the strength behind my calm. "Are you going to let them?" I smiled. "What do you think?" He looked down. "I think you're a lot sharper than they give you credit for." That made me laugh. A short, dry sound I hadn't heard from myself in weeks. "That's always been the secret. Let them talk over you long enough and they'll show you exactly where the cracks are." Eddie hesitated again, then leaned forward, elbows on knees. "What can I do?" I reached out, touched his wrist gently. "Right now? Nothing. Just keep your ears open and your heart steady." He nodded slowly. Inside, I could hear the familiar clatter of Haley moving through the kitchen, her precise footsteps, the opening and closing of drawers she'd reorganized without asking. There wasn't a corner of this house she hadn't claimed, except me. That afternoon, While Brian watched football and Haley worked in her office, I went back to my room and opened my laptop. The camera feed still functioned. I watched the bedroom, empty now, and imagined the memory of their conversation floating in the dust. I started a new document, labeled it Sequence B, Intent to Defraud. I logged everything Eddie had told me, the conversation, the timeline, even the words he used. Truth doesn't have to shout, George used to say. It just has to keep records. Later that evening, Brian knocked on my door. "Hey, Mom, can we chat?" I closed the laptop, slipped it under a magazine. "Of course." He sat across from me, hands clasped like a man about to give bad news at a board meeting. "Haley and we've been thinking. It might be a good idea to go over some of your documents. You know, just to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" He cleared his throat. "Well, in case anything happens. You're not getting younger, and we just want to make sure things are in order." I looked at him for a long moment. "I've already reviewed everything. With Mr. Crawford." His face didn't change, but the air in the room did. "When?" he asked. "Thursday. Why didn't you tell us?" I tilted my head. "You never asked." Brian shifted. "It's just, we're trying to help, Mom. We want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of." I smiled, slow and small. "So do I." There was a beat of silence. Then he stood abruptly. "Well, if you need anything, I'll let you know." When the door closed behind him, I sat still for a long time. They were beginning to feel the ground shift. Good. Let it. Haley had started taking more calls with the door closed. It wasn't subtle. She was the kind of person who believed closing a door meant no one could hear her. As if the walls in this house hadn't been built when insulation was more suggestion than fact. As if I hadn't raised a child here. As if I didn't know which floorboards creaked or how voices carried through the vents in the hallway. On Tuesday afternoon, she was in her office again. The door shut, the air purifier humming. I moved slowly, deliberately, cane in hand, slippers soft, and took my usual seat in the living room, just beside the hallway arch, the perfect spot to hear what wasn't meant for me. "She's stalling," Haley was saying, her voice hushed but clipped. "We need to accelerate the process. The agent says he can hold the offer for 2 more weeks, max." A pause. Then, "No, she hasn't signed anything yet. She's being difficult." Another pause. "I'm telling you, if we get a proper mental health evaluation and the documents from 2016, it'll be enough to push this through. The lawyer already said so. Brian just needs to bring it up again, maybe when she's tired, or after she takes her medication." The words landed sharp, but not unexpected. I kept my hands folded, my face calm. She'd chosen her battlefield. I was choosing mine. When she finally came out, phone tucked under her arm, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. "I'm making chicken tonight. You always liked it with thyme, didn't you?" I nodded. I did. No more than that. She lingered, waiting for something else. When I didn't offer it, she retreated back into the kitchen. That evening, I removed 3 pills from my nightstand organizer and flushed them down the toilet. They weren't dangerous. Nothing more than a mild sedative and the usual blood pressure nonsense. But if Haley thought she could drug me into docility, she'd soon learn better. By Thursday, Brian had begun tiptoeing too. At breakfast, he sat beside me with forced casualness. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling lately?" "Steady." He stirred his coffee. "You know, Haley and I were talking. We think it might be a good idea for you to come with us next week to visit Dr. Keene." "Just a checkup." I looked at him. "Your dementia specialist?" He hesitated. He's a general geriatric doctor, too. I said, sipping my tea. Strange. I don't remember requesting a consult. He gave a small laugh. It's not about requests, Mom. We just want to be proactive. Of course. And does Dr. Keene know he'll be evaluating someone without a referral or consent? Brian didn't answer, just kept stirring. Later that night, I printed another copy of the camera footage and labeled the envelope sequence C. Coercion attempts. Then I placed it inside the lining of my suitcase, just beneath the travel scarf Haley gave me last Christmas. The one she said would be perfect for outings, even though they never took me anywhere. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor. A young woman in a navy blazer knocked on the door just after 10. Haley answered, her smile instant and professional. "Hi there, I'm from Riverside Property Group," the woman chirped. "I'm here for the interior walkthrough. Mr. Howell said now was a good time." My spine stiffened. Haley's face froze. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "I wasn't told anyone would be coming today." "Oh, I confirmed with him yesterday. Just a quick look at the structure and layout. We already have the photos, but the buyers want a better sense of the space." I stepped into the foyer, cane tapping softly. "I believe there's been a mistake," I said, loud enough to carry. The agent looked at me. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Howell. You're the owner, right?" "I am." Her smile faltered. "Oh, I was under the impression you were misinformed." Behind me, Haley's face was pinched white. "We won't be doing a walkthrough today," I said gently. "There's no property for sale here. Not anymore." The woman glanced between us. I'll check back with my office." "Please do." She left quickly. Haley shut the door harder than she needed to. She didn't look at me. She didn't say a word. But her silence screamed. Good. Let it echo. Brian didn't come home that night. Haley said he was working late, but her voice was flat, brittle at the edges. She didn't even try to make eye contact. I could smell the fear on her. Not panic, not yet, but the kind of quiet, crawling dread that seeps in when control starts to slip through your fingers. We ate dinner in silence. She made salmon, overcooked. On purpose, maybe. I thanked her politely, took 2 bites, and excused myself. The truth was, I wasn't hungry, not for food. I had other appetites now. For clarity, for justice, for the sharp click of pieces falling into place. Upstairs, in the guest room I never truly made my own, I opened the laptop and checked the feed again. Still functional, still quiet, still mine. And now I had something new to add to my files. I opened the folder labeled Sequence D, Undisclosed Sale Attempt, and typed Sept 14, 10:12 a.m. Riverside property agent arrived for interior walkthrough. No prior notice. Claimed appointment made by Brian Howell. Owner, Jeanette Howell, was not informed. Visit denied. Then I closed the lid and sat in the dark, hands folded in my lap. The quiet was a different kind now. Not the helpless kind. The strategic kind. Saturday brought rain, long gray sheets that blurred the windows and made the house feel even more like a box I hadn't chosen. Haley stayed in her room most of the morning. I heard her pacing, heard drawers open and close. Once I caught a glimpse of her in the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and fast. "She's not signing anything." "Yes, she called the bank. I don't know what else she's done." "Good. Let her wonder." Eddie came home just after lunch, backpack soaked, hair damp. He dropped his shoes in the mudroom and walked straight into the kitchen where I was slicing an apple. "Grandma," he said, his voice careful, I need to ask you something. I nodded. Go on? He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. The screen showed a message, a screenshot, a text from his father. Keep an eye on her. If she slips up, records anything weird, let me know. She might not be stable. Eddie looked at me, jaw tight. He sent that to me last night. I don't think he meant for me to see it. I took a breath. And what do you think he meant by weird? Eddie swallowed. I think he meant if you started acting confused, or angry, or like you knew what was going on. I didn't speak for a long time. Then I said quietly, Thank you for showing me. I told him I wouldn't spy on you. I told him if he wanted something, he should talk to you like a grown man. That made something inside me unclench. A knot I hadn't even realized was there. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're a good boy. Eddie looked down. They think I don't notice anything, but I do. I've seen how they treat you, like you're a guest in your own life. I nodded. That's exactly what I am, but I don't understand. Why would they do all this? What do they even get out of it? I didn't want to tell him, but he was old enough. They want the house, I said. The value of it. The land. They think they can sell it while I'm here, and once it's gone, I won't have the means to fight. Eddie sat back. That's disgusting. Yes, I said calmly. It is. He was quiet for a long time. Then, can I help? You already are. That night, I added another entry to the file. Set 15, 1:47 p.m. Screenshot of text from Brian Howell to Edward Howell requesting surveillance and psychological monitoring of Jeanette Howell without consent. I printed it, labeled it, filed it, and went to bed with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows exactly where this is heading. I visited the notary on Monday, alone. The office was in an aging strip mall between a shoe repair shop and a shuttered bakery, the kind of place no one under 40 notices unless they're getting a document notarized or contesting a will. Just the way I liked it, quiet, unremarkable, forgettable. Mr. Aldridge still wore the same corduroy blazer he did 10 years ago and still offered stale peppermints from the ceramic dish on his desk. Well, Mrs. Howell, he said, adjusting his glasses, what brings you to my side of town? I pulled the envelope from my bag. I need to officially rescind all prior authorizations given to Brian Howell. Durable power of attorney, medical proxy, financial representation, everything. He blinked once. Understood. And I'd like it certified and documented in your ledger today. He nodded slowly. Of course. I'll also file a revocation notice with the county and send copies to your bank, your attorney, and your health provider. Any additional recipients? 1. I handed him a card with Brian's office address. Let him receive it where it counts. Mr. Aldridge didn't comment, just reached for a pen. And I added, I'd like to update my emergency contact. He looked up. To whom? I smiled. My grandson, Edward Howell. We filled out the forms in silence. I signed each page deliberately, my handwriting slow but steady. No shaking today, no hesitation. Afterward, he walked me to the door. If there's anything else, you know where to find me. I do. And I suspect I'll be needing your services again soon. Back home, Haley was in the garden, pruning shrubs with unnecessary force. Brian had returned at some point, judging by the SUV in the driveway, but he wasn't in sight. I went straight to my room, placed the official copies in the suitcase, and opened the laptop. The camera feed showed nothing new, just sunlight stretching across my empty bedroom floor. My bedroom, still mine. I opened a new file. Sequence. E. Legal action prep. Septi 18, 10:32 a.m. All powers of attorney revoked. Emergency contact changed. Notary certified. Then I uploaded all prior footage, every saved video, every labeled entry, into a secure cloud drive Eddie had helped me set up under a fake name, Margaret Darrow, a character from a novel I once taught, a woman who burned her house to the ground rather than let it be stolen. Dinner was quiet. Brian avoided my eyes. Haley oversalted the potatoes. Eddie watched all of us like a man recording things in his mind, one expression at a time. After we finished eating, Brian cleared his throat. "I think we should talk," he said. I folded my napkin. "About what?" "The house." Haley's fork paused midair. I looked at him evenly. "What about it?" "We've spoken to an agent, just to explore possibilities. Nothing's decided." I didn't reply. "But Mom," he continued, "this property is too much for you. The maintenance, the costs. You're not there anymore." "That's because you didn't let me go back." His mouth tightened. "It's not safe." "For whom?" He bristled. "Look, I'm just saying—" "No," I interrupted softly. "You're not saying. You're maneuvering. There's a difference." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I know about the appraisal, about the walkthrough, about the offer you tried to accept in my name." Haley sat frozen. "I also know," I continued, "that as of this morning, you no longer have any legal claim to represent me. Not in health, not in finance, and certainly not in real estate." Brian went pale. "I revoked everything," I said, "and I filed notice with your office." He stared at me. "You went behind my back?" "No," I said. "You were never in front of me to begin with." Silence. Then Eddie stood up and started clearing plates, like nothing had happened. Like everything had. The silence after that dinner was the kind that changes the air in a house. Thicker, heavier, like walking through water. Brian didn't speak to me the next morning. Just passed through the kitchen like I was part of the furniture. An old lamp he didn't care for anymore but couldn't quite bring himself to throw out. Haley barely glanced at me. She clutched her coffee mug with both hands and sipped as if it were the only thing tethering her to the room. I didn't mind. I'd lived through worse silences. After George died, the house was quiet in a way that hurt. Every corner a reminder of something unfinished. A question he'd never answer. A shadow where his voice should have been. But this silence? This was different. This was control. By noon, Brian was on the phone in his office. I heard him pacing, his voice low, tense, urgent. "She's digging in. No, she won't sign anything now. Yes, she lawyered up. Her old estate guy, Crawford. I know. I didn't think she still had it in her either." I smiled at that. Then came the part I expected. "What about medical capacity?" "If we push for a psych eval and there's anything borderline, it could open a window." So that's where they were heading. Not financial coercion anymore. Now it would be character assassination. Make me seem unstable, fragile, maybe even dangerous. I closed the hallway door gently, went back to my room, and called Mr. Crawford. He answered on the second ring. "Yes?" "It's Jeanette." His tone softened instantly. "Good morning, Mrs. Howell. I believe my son's about to attempt a mental health petition. I'd like to preempt that." Silence for a moment. Then, "What do you want to do?" "I'd like a statement on record from my primary care physician. Something concise, signed, dated, confirming full cognitive capacity as of this week." "Smart," he said. "Send me the name. I'll reach out myself." I gave it to him, then added, "Also, have your assistant draft a cease and desist letter addressed to Brian Howell and Haley Howell, regarding interference, harassment, and unauthorized attempts at fiduciary action. You want it formal? Stone cold. He chuckled softly. Understood. The letter arrived 2 days later. Crawford didn't just send it to their home. He sent it certified to Brian's office and emailed a PDF copy to Haley's consulting firm inbox. Eddie handed me his phone that afternoon with wide eyes. They're freaking out. I read the messages in silence. B. Did you know she had a lawyer? H. She's making us look abusive? B. You tried to sell the house? H. She wasn't using it. B. That doesn't matter anymore. She's boxed us in. Yes. Yes, I had. That evening, Haley tried to speak to me. Jeanette, she said, hovering in the doorway, we may have misunderstood each other. I know things have gotten tense. I looked at her calmly. She tried to smile. But maybe we could still talk through everything. Maybe it doesn't have to get ugly. It already did, I said. You just didn't expect me to notice. She swallowed hard. We were trying to help. No, I said. You were trying to help yourselves. Her face changed. Brittle, then sharp, then blank. She didn't speak again. And for the first time since I moved into this house, she didn't walk into the kitchen the next morning. The silence this time wasn't heavy. It was clean. Like something had finally broken open. Brian didn't come home for 3 days. He sent texts to Eddie. Short ones. Don't engage. Stay calm. It's temporary. But not a word to me. On Thursday, Haley packed 2 suitcases and moved into the guest room. She didn't say why, and I didn't ask. The silence between us had solidified into something permanent. Not anger, not even resentment. Just recognition. She knew it was over. She just hadn't figured out what that meant for her yet. I still made my tea every morning. Still folded the dish towels the way I liked. Still sat in the sunniest corner of the porch when the weather allowed. But now, every movement felt freer. My steps lighter. Even the cane didn't drag anymore. It tapped. Like punctuation. Eddie and I ate dinner alone that night. I made grilled cheese. He brought lemonade. We didn't talk about Brian, or Haley, or the house. We just sat like people do when the war's not quite over. But the worst battles have been won. He cleared the dishes without being asked, then lingered in the kitchen doorway. Grandma? Yes? When this is all done, are you going back? I looked up. To the house? He nodded. You said it was still yours, still safe. It is. He hesitated. Can I help? I smiled. You already are. That night, I pulled out the leather notebook again. I hadn't touched it in a few days. I flipped to a fresh page. September 28, 9:34 p.m. Haley moved into guest room. Brian absent. No verbal contact initiated since cease and desist. No retaliation yet. Legal position holding. Emotional temperature. Steady. I stared at that last line for a moment, then added one more word. Alive. The next morning, a letter arrived. Certified. From my bank. I opened it slowly, fingers steady. It was confirmation of final account restructuring. My investments, my trusts, the deed, all now fully out of reach of Brian, Haley, or any representatives. I folded the paper neatly, walked to my suitcase, and tucked it in next to the others. Then I pulled out a smaller envelope, already addressed, already sealed. I handed it to Eddie after lunch. Can you drop this at the post office? He looked at it. What is it? Just something I should have sent a long time ago. He raised an eyebrow. You don't want to tell me? I smiled. You'll find out soon enough. He grinned, tucked it in his hoodie pocket, and left. What I didn't tell him was that inside that envelope was a copy of all the footage, the logs, the emails, everything. Sent to George's cousin upstate, a lawyer, the only other person I trusted, a backup, just in case. By sunset, the house felt quiet again, but not the suffocating kind of quiet. The clear kind, like something had been drained out of the walls, something toxic, invisible, and heavy. Eddie came back with a small paper bag. "I picked up some of those lemon candies you like," he said, sheepish. "They only had the sour ones, but—" I took one and unwrapped it. "Thank you, sweetheart." We sat together on the porch again. The wind tugged at the trees. Somewhere a dog barked. "Do you think they'll stop?" he asked. "Your parents?" He nodded. "No," I said. "But I don't need them to." He was quiet a moment, then said, "You're not scared, are you?" I thought about that. "No," I said finally. "They took enough from me. I won't let them take fear too." Brian came back on Sunday. He didn't knock, didn't call ahead. Just walked in at 10:42 a.m. like it was still his house, like his absence had never happened. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a crossword puzzle, pen in hand, lemon candy tucked in my cheek. I looked up when the door clicked. He stood there a moment, keys still in hand, scanning the room like a man checking for fire damage. "You're home?" I said calmly. He nodded once. "Can we talk?" I closed the puzzle book slowly. "We can." He didn't sit, just leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Mom, I don't know what you think you've accomplished, but this power play, the lawyer, the letters—" I raised a hand. "No," I said. "You don't get to come in here and scold me, not after what you tried to do." He shifted, jaw clenched. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. You weren't trying to protect me either." Silence. "I was trying to keep things manageable," he muttered. "I have a family, bills. The house was sitting there empty." "It wasn't empty," I said. "It was waiting. For me. Not for you, not for some stranger with a mortgage." "For me?" Brian exhaled harshly, pushing a hand through his hair. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "You don't." He looked at me then, really looked. And I saw something break in his expression. Not guilt, not regret. Something smaller, duller, like a man realizing the safe he spent weeks trying to crack was already open and empty. "I've rescinded everything," I said. "You know that. You can't act for me anymore. Not legally, not financially, not medically." "I know. There's no sale," I added. "There never will be. Not without my signature. And I won't be giving it." He didn't argue. He just stood there. Then, finally, he asked, "What now? You mean, do I forgive you?" He nodded, barely. I folded my hands in my lap. "Forgiveness isn't what you need. What you need is a conscience." He flinched. I stood slowly, the cane steady in my hand. Walked to the hallway, took a thin folder from the drawer, and placed it on the table in front of him. "What's this?" "Copies," I said. "Of everything you did. Everything you said. Every email. Every call. Every step." His fingers hovered above it. "You're threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm freeing you." He looked at me, confused. "You don't have to lie anymore," I said. "Not to me, not to yourself, not to Eddie." He winced at the name. "You can go on pretending this was all some misunderstanding, or you can sit with what you did and grow the hell up." He didn't pick up the folder. He just left it there. After a moment, he stepped back, eyes lowered. "You win," he said. I shook my head. "No, Brian. I just stopped losing. And I went back to my puzzle. Eddie heard everything. He didn't mean to, or maybe he did. Teenagers have a way of being exactly where they shouldn't, quietly enough that even the floorboards don't betray them. I found him later on the back porch, sitting cross-legged on the swing, staring out into the garden like the roses might answer for what his parents had done. I sat beside him without speaking. The swing creaked once under my weight, then settled. "You told him the truth," he said finally. "I did." Eddie nodded, slow and tight. "I didn't think you would." "I didn't want to," I said. "But I had to." He rubbed his hands together. "He's my dad." "I know. I don't want to hate him. I don't want you to either." He turned to look at me. His face raw in that way only young men allow themselves to be when they're still half boy. "But I do." I reached out and smoothed the hair from his forehead, like I used to when he was small and had nightmares about the basement. "You're allowed to feel whatever comes," I said, "but don't build a home inside that feeling. Visit it, then leave." Eddie looked down at his shoes. He lied to me, to everyone. I nodded. And now he's been seen. That matters. He was quiet for a long time. The swing creaked again. Finally, he said, "Are you going back? To the house?" I watched the wind move through the hedges. The sun was warm on my hands. "Yes," I said. "Next week. It's time." "Can I help you pack?" I smiled. "You can drive me." He blinked. "Seriously? You've had your license for 6 months and haven't backed into the mailbox once. That's better than most people." He grinned, the first real one I'd seen in days. "You sure?" "I am." He looked back out at the yard. "It'll be weird without you here." I looked at him. "You'll be all right." He nodded. "I think I will." That evening, Haley returned to the kitchen for the first time since the folder. She didn't speak, just pulled out a pan and started making scrambled eggs like it was any other night. No eye contact, no apology. Just the quiet mechanics of someone trying to exist without drawing attention. I let her cook. Let her set 2 plates on the counter. Let her act like silence could glue the cracks shut. Then I said, "He's hurting." She froze, then turned, slowly. "Eddie," I added. "He's hurting, and it's not his fault." She nodded once. "I know." "You used to be kind to me," I said. "Back when George was sick. You brought soup, sat with me, let me cry without looking away." "I remember," she whispered. "What happened to that woman?" Haley didn't answer for a long time, then quietly, "She got scared. She watched people get old and lose everything. She didn't want to end up like them." "You became exactly what you feared," I said. "You took from someone who still had something left." She didn't cry. I think she'd used up all her tears on herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "I believe you," I said. "But I still don't trust you." She nodded. "That's fair." I left the eggs on the counter, went to my room, packed 2 more shirts, folded my nightgown, opened the drawer and took out the photo of George by the lake, 27 years old and shirtless, holding a trout like a trophy. Slipped it into my suitcase. We were almost ready. I didn't sleep the night before we left. Not because I was anxious, not really. It was something else. A kind of quiet alertness. Like my body knew something sacred was about to return to me and didn't want to miss its arrival by sleeping through it. Eddie came to my door at 7 sharp, car keys in hand, eyes still puffy from sleep. "You sure about this?" he asked. I looked at him over the rim of my coffee cup. More sure than I've been about anything in years. He took the suitcase without another word. Haley didn't come downstairs. I didn't expect her to. We'd said all we needed to say, and maybe more. She'd tried to apologize again last night, a few broken sentences in the hallway, something about fear and pressure and being young. But I stopped her. "Don't explain," I said. "Just stop." She had. Brian hadn't returned since our last conversation. Whether that was guilt, cowardice, or strategy, I didn't care. His absence was its own kind of confession. We pulled out of the driveway just before 8. I didn't look back. The highway was quiet. Eddie kept the radio off. I think he understood what kind of moment this was, how even silence can feel like ceremony. Halfway there, he asked, "What are you going to do when you get back?" "Open the windows," I said. "Let the dust out. Make tea in my own kitchen." He smiled. "That sounds small?" "It is," I said. "Small is what they tried to take from me." We pulled into the driveway just after 10. The house was exactly as I remembered it. White trim still flaking in one corner. The porch swing swaying a little, even though there was no breeze. The curtains I'd sewn myself hanging unevenly in the front window. I didn't cry. I expected to, maybe even feared it. But the tears didn't come. What came instead was a kind of anchoring, like I'd stepped back into my bones after living outside them too long. Eddie helped me to the front door. I took out the key from my coat pocket. The original one. The brass one George had cut himself at the hardware store with the little chipped corner. It still fit. Still turned smooth. Inside, the air was musty, but not unfriendly. Like a room that had simply been waiting to be noticed again. I walked through the house slowly, touched the edge of the dining table, ran a hand over the banister, opened the hall closet, George's flannel jacket still hanging there, faintly smelling of cedar. "This place is—" Eddie trailed off. "Mine," I finished. He nodded. We set the suitcase down in the bedroom. The same one they'd stood in weeks ago, whispering about appraisals and diminished capacity. I stood in that same spot now, alone, upright, intact, and I breathed. God, I breathed. We stayed the night. Eddie on the pull-out couch in the living room, me in my own bed for the first time in 6 months. The mattress was firmer than I remembered. My body had softened in places it hadn't meant to. But I didn't mind. I lay in the dark and listened to the house exhale around me. Not haunted, just quiet, just mine. In the morning, I made oatmeal and burned the first batch. Eddie ate it anyway. "It tastes like freedom," he said, through a mouthful, grinning. I laughed. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed in my own kitchen. That afternoon, the mail came. Among the usual envelopes, insurance offers, catalogs, one belated birthday card, was a thick manila envelope. Return address, Crawford and Associates. Inside, the final copy of the new deed structure, trust certificate, amended will, executor appointment. All signed, sealed, bulletproof. And on top of it all, a simple letter. "Jeanette, I've seen a lot of families, a lot of greed, a lot of damage. But what you've done, quietly, steadily, without fanfare, it reminds me what dignity looks like. You're safe now, officially, irrevocably. Keep breathing. R. Crawford." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the drawer beside the stove. Later that evening, I stood on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders and a cup of tea in my hand, watching the last light sink behind the trees. Eddie came out and leaned on the railing beside me. "Do you think they'll come here?" "I don't know. I said. Would you let them in? No. He nodded. Good. The crickets were starting up in the yard. Somewhere, a dog barked. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything anymore. The days passed in quiet patterns. I woke early, swept the kitchen floor, read the newspaper even when the news made me sigh. I folded towels the way I liked, not the way Haley did. I watered the begonias, though most of them were half dead. They'd come back if I stayed consistent. So would I. Eddie drove back to the city on Wednesday. College was starting soon, and he had books to buy, forms to fill. He stood on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, hesitant in a way that didn't match his age. "You'll be okay?" he asked. "I've been okay longer than you've been alive," I said. He smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. "I meant, if they come back." "They might," I said, "but the door will stay locked." He nodded. "You'll call me?" "If you stop by once a week, I won't have to." He laughed at that, hugged me tight. Then he was gone, his car rolling down the gravel driveway and out of sight. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because his leaving didn't feel like loss. It felt like balance, like the pendulum had finally swung the other way. That evening, I found the folder again. The one I'd shown Brian, the one he never touched. It was still thick with paper, with proof, with names and dates and quotes. I flipped through it slowly, remembering each entry. I thought about burning it, letting the fire eat the facts, now that I no longer needed them, letting the past go up in smoke, the way people say healing looks. But then I closed it, put it back in the drawer. Healing doesn't mean erasing, it means carrying better. On Friday, I received a letter, handwritten, Haley's script. She didn't beg, didn't accuse, just said she was sorry again. Said Brian had moved in with his sister for a while. Said she wasn't sure where things had gone wrong. The words were cautious, carefully weighed, afraid of setting off another fuse. At the bottom, she'd written, "You were never weak. I just convinced myself you were." I folded the letter, left it on the counter, didn't respond. Some things don't need an answer. They just need time to echo. I started sleeping with the window open again. There's a sound the trees make here, that soft rustling that only happens late, after the heat has dropped and the crickets are loud. I used to think it was the wind. Now I think it might be something else. Something older. A house remembering you. I stood at the back door one night, barefoot, tea in hand, and whispered into the dark, "I'm still here." No one answered, but I didn't feel alone. On Sunday, I opened the last box from the closet. Inside, a stack of photographs. George in his work boots. Eddie as a baby, bald and furious. Brian, age 11, clutching a baseball glove and grinning like the world hadn't started to harden yet. At the bottom, a photo I hadn't seen in years. Me, age 24. In the yard of this house, sunlight in my hair, hands in the dirt. Planting something. I looked strong. Not in the way people mean now, not gym strong or loud strong, but real, solid, rooted. I placed the photo on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tomato. Then I went outside, found the same patch of soil, and sat beside it. The dirt was dry, but it would take water. The light was slanted but still warm. I thought about planting something again. Maybe next week. Maybe. The phone rang on Monday morning. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again in the afternoon. Different number. Same silence behind it. By evening, a message blinked on the machine. Brian's voice. Mom, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know that doesn't change it. I know I was wrong. I let fear run the show. I let Haley push too hard. And I pushed too. You didn't deserve that. You built everything I have. I forgot that. I see it now. A pause. Then, softer. I hope someday you'll want to talk. I'll be here, whenever you're ready. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet after the beep. Then I pressed delete. Forgiveness isn't a phone call. It's a boundary. And mine was solid now. The days grew cooler. I moved through them the way I used to. With rhythm, not routine. There's a difference. One feels like being alive. The other feels like trying not to be noticed. I baked again. Small things. Bread that cracked at the edges. Cookies Eddie liked when he was little. A pie that sank slightly in the middle but tasted like fall. People started waving again when they passed the house. I hadn't realized they'd stopped. Maybe they hadn't. Maybe it was just me who'd gone still. But now, I waved back. On the first Sunday of October, I walked to church. It's a short walk, but I took my time. Wore my long coat, the one with the frayed cuffs I never quite mended. Sat in the back pew like I always used to, where I could see everyone and no one could see me cry if I felt like it. No one asked where I'd been. That was kindness. Kindness is knowing something happened and not needing to say so out loud. After the service, the pastor stopped me at the door. "Jeanette," he said, "it's good to have you back." I smiled. "It's good to be back." He nodded, but didn't push. Just patted my hand and let me go. Outside, the wind was cool. The leaves had started to turn. It smelled like my life again. That week, I began making lists. Not the kind I used to. Milk, bread, batteries. No. These were different. People I trust. Things I won't tolerate. What I still want. That last one was the hardest. It's easy to know what you don't want when someone tries to take it. It's harder to remember what you want once you've protected it. But I wrote things anyway. To plant again. To laugh without apology. To leave the front door open when the weather is good. To matter. And under that, in smaller print. To be loved without being managed. Haley wrote once more. A longer letter this time. She said she was seeing someone. A therapist. Said she was trying to figure out when she'd started confusing control with care. Said she hoped Eddie wouldn't grow up afraid of softness, the way she had. She didn't ask me to write back. That was wise. Some things you leave in the past, not because they didn't matter, but because they can't follow you where you're going. I saw Eddie again last weekend. He pulled into the driveway in a car I didn't recognize. Older, boxy, probably borrowed. He had a basket with him, full of food. Leftovers, he said, from a cooking club he joined. You joined a cooking club? I teased. He shrugged. Girls like guys who know what a mandolin is. We sat on the porch, ate from mismatched containers, pasta, roasted vegetables, some chocolate thing I pretended wasn't too sweet. He watched me for a while, then said, You look taller. I smiled. Maybe I stopped bending. He nodded, but he was still watching me. You're not mad at them anymore, are you? I'm not carrying them anymore, I said. That's different. He leaned back, satisfied. We sat like that until the sun dipped and the porch light came on. I gave him leftovers in a paper bag. He kissed the top of my head and said, I'm proud of you. And I believed him. For the first time in a long time, I believed it. This morning, I took the last photograph off the fridge and moved it to the hallway. Hung it between the coat hooks. Me, age 24. Planting something. I looked at it, then at the window. The light was just right. So I pulled on my gloves, went out to the yard, knelt in the dirt, started again. Quietly. Fully. As myself. If this story touched you, share it. Someone else out there might need reminding. You're not done yet.